All right, welcome to the Staff and Trenchcoat. Today we're going to be talking about Deathmaker by J.C. Mckenzie. It's the first book in the Lark Morgan series. I'm Raymond Magdallan, as always, here with my co-host Pope Jupiter.
Welcome.
And today we're just going to jump right into it. This is a shorter book, certainly than our last episode with The Way of Kings. And so fairly unscripted, we're just going to kind of jump in and discuss the book. And I think the best way to start it is, since last time I went in first with my sort of reflections on the novel generally, I'll throw it to you this time and say, well, what are your general thoughts? Did you enjoy this book? How does it compare to the other titles that we've read so far, etc.?
This might be one of the most enjoyable books I have ever read, let alone that I've read for this show. I was actually thinking when we got into the call that this is the first book we've gotten together to discuss, to do the show for, and we haven't talked about before. And it's partially a factor of the fact that we just picked this book to read a week and a half ago.
Yeah, something like that. I absolutely crushed it. It was a 2-day read for me.
Yeah, and I mean, I probably read it over the course of 3 or 4 hours over over the course of a week and a half. Like I devoured this book when I put aside the time to actually read it. It is an amazing. I have to say, I intend to read more from this author, and I hope that she gets everything she wants in life. Whether that just means that she makes a comfortable living selling niche urban fantasy romance novels to weirdos like me, fine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the same boat. Just before we started, I said I just can't really think of a negative comment to make about the story. There are
It's too
some,
short.
yeah, yeah, but the pricing was, what was it, $4 for the Kindle version?
I paid 250 because apparently I had a $1.50 credit. So yeah, well worth it.
And I mean, it was still, wasn't it, 300 pages or so?
Yeah, a very rapid 300 pages, especially given our last 300-page novel that somehow was 1,100 pages.
Yeah, and I suspicion as well that there's a little bit of a, the page numbers are a little bit misleading. I suspicion the type spacing and font size and all of that might have been a little bit larger for if you were to get the actual, paperback version of the book. I don't think one page of this would have been the equivalent to like one page in a Sanderson novel. I think
So in
I think
my
it was like
Kindle,
70,000 words.
yeah, I mean, if we go by that metric, then it may be less than 300 words. But in my Kindle, I have 301 pages total in the book, including all the appendix stuff at the end. And I have my font to the second smallest setting, and that's just because I didn't set it to the smallest. I totally can. And when it's smallest, it is still 301 pages.
Yeah, because it's going to give you the page readout based on the print version.
Oh, okay. That
So
tracks.
I'm saying I think the font might be a little bit larger, and I suspicion that the dimensions of the paperback are, it's probably not like a pocket size. I think it's probably the one size up from that, where it's a little bit wider. It has larger print, which is fine
Right.
because I would actually prefer it if most books adopted that instead of the really small print that is common for, fantasy pocket-sized paperbacks. But yeah, there's the book flew by. I think there are some sort of, I'll phrase it as immature, kind of easy criticisms that you could make. The writing style is not very complex. There's not a lot of allusion. There's not a deep level of, metaphorical language at play. However, I just don't feel like those criticisms are necessary. The book doesn't pretend to be anything that it's not. And we both knew going in that we were getting an urban fantasy with romance elements, and it absolutely fucking delivers what it says it's going to deliver. And it was just a joy to read.
And I will say the romance, despite being central to the plot, is not bad romance. It's not overly sweet or anything like that. If anything, it's anti sincerity. But it was very good, believable romance.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's because I was all pent up from 1,000 pages of like the hyper Victorian anti-sex of Way of Kings, but it was almost just a relief to have a degree of just direct, uh, unapologetic discussion of sexuality in the text. It made the characters more believable and it made the story move along. Again, I think, we're both male readers. I think there is a contingent of people that would sort of, poo poo at the novel just for having those elements in it. But I think that's an increasingly dated and rapidly shrinking contingent of readers. And I think most people would enjoy the elements of romance that are present in this story. Another pithy potential criticism could be that the fairy tale elements that are drawn upon are generally predictable. There's not a whole lot of surprises in terms of what types of creatures and things end up appearing. But again, the book doesn't really set itself up as though it's going to knock down any huge barriers of expectation in terms of genre. The author is very upfront with what the novel is, even in the little blurb on the Amazon page. And so, those are just two things that I think, a reader could potentially point their finger at and make a criticism of. But I found that those potential criticisms did not at all hold any water as I made my way through the novel and found myself enjoying it and wanting to read another chapter. Also, the brevity of the chapters was very nice in terms of, for me at least, in terms of having lots of very nice points at which to take a break. And the author does a very good job of making each chapter its own little unit with a build up and they interlock well together. The points of break are well thought out. Yeah, so contrary to 2 out of the 3 novels that we've covered so far, this is mostly going to be us writing a love letter.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that, to your first point regarding the fairy tale tropes, that's largely a genre convention. Like, I messaged you about this, when we talked about it, and I guess this is gonna spur this discussion. This is my favorite genre of urban fantasy, where every fairy tale is actually true, but the devil is in the details. So yes, fairies are tricksters who will want to who will have power over you if you give them your name, but like maybe they're not actually allergic to cold iron, or maybe they aren't actually that powerful. They're more just annoying tricksters who can, make your day a little less pleasant, but they're not going to like ruin your life. That kind of thing is very much a convention of this genre. So the real authorial voice is in how you modify it. Like, to which I will say, I guess I have to express my lack of familiarity with what is considered standard fare, because the only real major diversion I saw, other than her specific usages of necromancy, were the vampires not having to sleep during the day. That's not a novel modification, but it is a an unusual one.
Yeah, she did play around a little bit with I think some of the conventions having to do with some of the critters that exist in the narrative world that she's created, but I don't think any of that was earth shattering or genre breaking. But to sort of answer that, I'm gonna break one of our unspoken rules of the podcast. We sort of agreed at the outset this wasn't going to be sort of like an academic critique enterprise. But I found that when I read the novel, I kind of felt I was like, is this urban fantasy? Is that what that means? I admit my background is much more in high fantasy, and I haven't spent a whole lot of time with urban fantasy as a genre. Certainly not at the academic level. And so, given that I'm right now working on grad school applications, I I just sort of had my hands on a bunch of my old copies from when I did my MA of the Journal for the Fantastic and the Arts, and there was a an article in one of them called "Urban Fantasy: A Literature of the Unseen" by someone named Stephen Ekman. That came out in 2016, and there's a quick passage I want to read that just discusses the genre as a whole, and then I figured we can sort of ground ourselves in that, and I'd be interested in your take on that. So it's just one paragraph, but nonetheless, it is an academic paragraph. So I'll see if I can read it without too much of stuttering here.
I'll try not to fall asleep.
Absolutely. So, as Britt Mandelo and others have suggested, it makes sense to refer to urban fantasy as a genre in its own right rather than see it as a subgenre to fantasy. That urban fantasy is at least a generic hybrid is often pointed out, for instance, by McLennan, Holmes, and Mandelo, other scholars. Its root genres are not only fantasy, but gothic horror and romance. And it can also draw on mystery, science fiction, and crime fiction. How much and what each root contributes to the works of a particular urban fantasist, indeed to particular texts, varies greatly. It's been proposed that urban fantasy is almost as wide a term as fantasy or science fiction for how much space it can cover thematically.
I agree with everything you said.
Well, everything Stefan said.
Right.
And I tend to, I agree as well. As I said, my expertise is nowhere. I mean, it's tertiary, but this isn't a genre that I had studied a great deal, and so I sort of imagined that urban fantasy was much more of a narrow spectrum of works. But given what I'm reading here, and then throughout the rest of this article, it does seem as though not only does Deathmaker fit into this genre, it does so well and very gracefully, and it in fact exemplifies just about everything that's listed here, with the exception maybe of science fiction. We've got mystery, we've got crime, we've got the romance elements, and it is existing, I think, very well within the themes of the genre. And so that's sort of a pip in the hat of the author here. She does what is an exemplary job at creating this world and kind of bending some rules here and there. Certainly, creating a unique and prominent voice for herself, and but then also doing really well to sort of work within the admittedly blurry lines of what the genre entails. I
Yeah, I think the blurry line there, I've always looked at urban fantasy as, well, it's a normal crime or thriller or horror or whatever novel, but magic is real. It's just that one little twist, and it often adds a lot of depth to stories, I found.
Yeah, well, and I should have remembered that, and this will be my last academic comment, but -5 scholar points to me because a pretty prominent fantasy scholar, Brian Atbury, has always referred to the descriptions of genre within fantasy to necessarily be a fuzzy set, is the term that he uses, and I sort of forgot about that, and I guess I was thinking urban fantasy equals Dresden Files. And so I was expecting a certain thing. And so that just sort of outs me as just not being knowledgeable enough about what the genre is and not having read enough in it.
I
And it
mean,
didn't, it,
Dresden Files is just a mystery whodunit, but magic is real.
yeah, so it definitely fits. But my initial thought was, okay, is this kind of a different type of genre? But no, in fact, both the Dresden Files and Deathmaker both sit comfortably within the moniker of urban fantasy with no qualm.
See, I've always felt that the idea that that science fiction, fantasy, romance, and mystery are four, to some people, distinct separate genres. When like every science fiction story can contain mystery, can revolve around a mystery. Like it feels like people have taken setting and conflated it with genre because fantasy and science fiction feel more like you're talking about setting, where things like mystery, romance, thriller, that's where you're talking about plots or themes. Am I way off base here or am I
No, I
making
don't think
sense?
so. I don't think so. I think that's accurate. And I guess in the Dresden Files, there are some sort of fairy story elements, but this, I guess
Uh,
I
have you
almost
read the Dresden Files?
I have read one. I read the
Okay.
first novel, and then of course
Okay.
I adored the kitschy Sci-Fi Channel TV
TV show.
adaptation. I loved that shit.
Without getting too much into spoiler territory, there's a lot of fairy tale shit in
Okay, so
Dresden
he
Files.
he ramps it up.
Uh, at one point, Dresden is the knight of one of the queens of the Fae.
Okay, so yeah, I mean I think we've driven it home. So I had some confusion about the contents of the term urban fantasy, and so that made me think that maybe this novel was existing outside of the bounds of that a little bit, which didn't affect my enjoyment of the novel. It was merely just an interest, a consideration. But without question, if you're a person who what you like is urban fantasy, this will do it for you.
Absolutely.
So hit me with your thoughts on the magic system, unless you have more general comments to make.
No, I'm happy to move on to the magic system. Especially in contrast to our last author, Sanderson. This was a wonderfully literary magic system because there was no hard rules except that she needs blood and bones to control the spirits. And she is some large amount more powerful than most other necromancers. The whole Leviathan and the Veil was an interesting limiter on the power. And the way it's actually kind of funny the fact that she basically has learned everything from the equivalent of Reddit and YouTube is hilarious, especially given a conversation we had a couple weeks ago.
Absolutely.
There were a few times where there were holes in her knowledge, and I wish I could remember some now, because there were things that things she was ignorant of that made sense logically to me as someone who has not studied necromancy, especially. I don't know if you remember seeing anything like that.
I don't have a specific scene to call up.
But other than that, I mean, yeah, the magic system was interesting.
I thought that the magic system was the weakest part of the novel, although I still enjoyed it. There was a lot of sort of gray areas that were kind of ill defined. And as you said, there was the limiter of the Leviathan and the Veil, but you don't really, even by the end of the novel, you don't get any kind of a concrete knowledge of where the main character's power level is, unless you can contrast it a little bit with the vampire lord that she works with. She seems like she's not as powerful as he is, but even there she kind of alludes to, well, there are ways that I could do this or that, but they'd probably get me. There was a lot of kind of evasive language in terms of descriptions of how powerful she was, and then that gets additionally complicated by her genealogy, her familial ties. I would have liked a little bit more clarity. In general, I enjoyed the descriptions of how she uses the magic system, although the constant sacrificing of chickens I found off-putting, but not because of anything that I think she was intending to forestall with the trigger warning at the beginning of the novel, but merely because it just was kind of lame. But again, those were pretty small parts of the novel. I don't. It didn't drag it down for me. I really liked the scene where I'm forgetting the guy's name, but he tricks her into touching the Book of the Dead, and it pricks her finger, and then she accidentally puts her blood on it, and the book has bones on it, which then she kind of gets sucked into the veil. I enjoyed that. I also liked the mechanism of the tie that she has to the vampire lord, and that kind of bails her out at one juncture. So there were lots of things to like, I think, about the magic system. It just was a little bit too far on the spectrum of being, because technically, I guess it was still a hard magic system, right? It wasn't, a sheer Gandalf style wonder type. So it was clearly a magic system that had rules,
Right.
stated rules, but you know, intentionally being a little bit more critical than is necessary. I think the author could have done more to make that system feel concrete. Even just a few paragraphs here and there that gave us a little bit of information about exactly what she could and couldn't do. Although I suspicion that we're going to get more of that information in subsequent entries in the series, which I
And
think I will probably read.
yeah, my assumption is that uh, her family lineage, the magic system, her exact place in the magic power hierarchy, all of those things are deliberate sequel hooks. Given that, I mean, she published the three books currently existing in this series over the course of like 6 months this year. So this feels like it was one, like 1,000-page novel that she retooled into a trilogy because that was easier to sell.
Yeah, or she wrote them all at once and then allowed herself to have these kind of less clear elements and hooks because she knew that nobody would be waiting more than at most a couple months if they picked it up day one for the next book to come out. But I mean, even all told, the three books, if it's 1,000 pages or whatever, you're talking $12 or something. 100% worth it, no question.
Yeah. It does remind me, we discussed this last episode, it reminds me of fan fiction. The way sometimes people will write series in fan fiction. And so you'll have a series that they write a chapter at a time, and whether they plan everything out, what ends up happening is that you have threads that run throughout. I've seen series that run 3 or 4. Some people rewrote the entire Harry Potter series, all 7 books, I'm not joking. And there'll be threads that run throughout them that get paid off in different books. So, it may be a similar situation like that where, uh, she planned out the trilogy or planned out the series.
So, I'm just sort of, I hate to use the phrase, but playing devil's advocate because we were pretty rough on Sanderson with not allowing for, well, this probably gets fixed in the second book or whatever. So, if we take that same tact with this particular novel and treat it as straight up standalone, then I think she does lose a couple points in this made up system for her treatment of magic as being a little bit, I guess I want to say like loose, a little bit too loose for my taste.
Yeah, that's a fair criticism that, if we were that harsh on Sanderson, we can't really be this soft on her just because we enjoyed this more.
Right. But I have a
S
I have a burning question. I guess it is part of the magic system. So is Kang a werewolf? Is that what was going on?
I couldn't quite put my finger on what his deal is.
Because he was doing the sniffy sniffy.
Yeah, werewolf seems the most, now that you mention it, werewolf definitely fits the tropes, the protectiveness of Lark, the being able to, the heightened sense of smell, all that stuff. Yeah, I bet he is a werewolf. I had been thinking that werewolves were conspicuous by their absence in this book that features vampires and necromancers, and well, I guess it really is just vampires and necromancers and ghosts. We don't even really get any zombies.
No, but they do come up. She
Yes.
does describe them, and I actually really love the way that she set those up as sort of like they're not like they are in the movies. They actually end up a lot of times just kind of turning into like weird puppy dogs, and I'm hoping that we get some comic relief maybe in the second or third book where that kind of happens.
I totally hope that there's a scene where she is like all badass necromancer witch queen, and then like something happens and she immediately has to comfort her whimpering zombie puppy who like stubbed its toe or something. Like that would be amazing.
Yeah, and I think it would fit into because you use this term a lot, and I typically do not, but I like the term, and I think I was incorrect in assuming that it had a negative connotation. But the book is very campy, right?
Yes. I
And
think a
so
lot of people deliberately assign a negative connotation to campy, but I don't think it necessitates a negative connotation.
I liked the formulation of it. I think you said this during the show last time, but where you took essentially, if I'm paraphrasing you correctly, that cheesy and campy are essentially the two sides of the coin describing similar elements. Where something is it gets cheesy, that's sort of like a negative, and campy is actually the inverse of that, where it's the same type of elements at play, that the same types of maybe generalized feelings, but done in a way that is actually pleasing. And
Yeah,
in that sense, I this book for me was very campy, and so I expected that we would see more, as you said, the absence of a so named werewolf was strange, and so I assume that that's what's going on with Kang. But I think the way that she led up to their romance towards the I don't know what last third I guess of the story, and then bringing in his sense of smell and so on and so forth. It to me it just amped up the campiness. I enjoyed it.
yeah, I enjoyed Kang. It was strange for me because like the way we're introduced to Kang is Lark talking about him and saying how much of an asshole he is and how much of a how much he hates her. And then we actually meet him, and I'm like, oh, he's in love with her. Like, it's super obvious that he is super protective of her and loves her and all this. And when they kept insisting that he hates her, or when she kept insisting that he hates her, and I was like, am I reading misreading this? Am I? It was just so blindingly obvious, even to me, what the author was going for there, that Lark's obliviousness to it felt very deliberate as well.
Well, and I think it clearly was a stylistic choice on the part of the author, but this is not a story of deep subtlety. This is clearly meant to be cards on the table. I'm telling you an urban fantasy story with campy critters and romance elements, and it is what it is. And I agree with you that it seemed like that was a device that she used to humanize Lark's character to the reader. I don't know if I would say that it's giga successful, because it at times it seemed like she was a little bit ham-fistedly naive, but in general I would say it worked well. The character, because this is another thing that I hammered on Sanderson for in Way of Kings, and I'm forgetting the name of the After the Revolution. In both of those two books, I made the criticism that some of the characters' actions interfered with my ability to suspend disbelief. More so Sanderson, but I believe make the same criticism of After the Revolution.
Yeah,
In this story, not a problem. I felt like the character responses were always within the realm of what I thought was believable inside the scope of suspension of disbelief, and particularly Lark's quips that she would make after people said stuff, I thought were sometimes just verging on the ingenious, and the picture of the way that you would expect that character to react. She just sometimes nails it to the 10 out of 10, 100% accurate degree.
Yeah, I really appreciate Lark's character. She's reasonably flawed character who still has her strengths. Like she's very clever and witty, also overconfident, and but also in some ways lacking in confidence, particularly with her magic. She's a very, very good character, I thought.
Yeah, and I think well-rounded. The Again, just to keep things fair, I think the one criticism that you could make is that there isn't a great deal of character development in the at least in the first volume of the series here. I pretty much felt like the Lark Morgan that we get in chapter one is the Lark Morgan that we get at the end. And
More or less.
some events, her perception of some of the other characters changes, but she does not change a great deal. And I don't know if that is a fixture of the genre or a commonality amongst novels that exist in this genre, because I feel like I had the similar kind of feeling about the Dresden Files, in that you kind of already. I almost want to draw the a line to something like Sherlock Holmes or something, where the story is not, you are not being presented with a character that you are expecting to change, because the thing that is
No,
fun about the novel is that Sherlock Holmes is already who he is. He's not going to change. The reason you're there is to watch the fully developed Sherlock Holmes go on an adventure. Same thing with Dresden. I don't expect him to change a whole lot. That's part of the grittiness, I guess, of the backdrop of the story, is that he kind of all he has problems that he has to deal with, and his perceptions of events and people change, but the character itself is by design static.
I have not read the entirety of the Dresden Files, but I read up through like book 9 or 10, and he did change. His character
Okay,
changed.
so maybe over the course of several books that happens.
Yeah. I mean, it takes a while. You are correct that he remains somewhat static through the early books, but he experiences several monumental events that do change him and affect him. And as far as Lark goes, I do think there is a bit of change in her self perception. I think I do feel like she has leveled up to some degree by the end of the book as far as being a necromancer. Now, that's not necessarily character development in the literary sense, but it does affect her perception of herself. But I agree there isn't a great deal of character development in this book as far as character change.
Yeah, there weren't any moments of sort of like earth-shattering, alterations to her psyche, or massive flaws that get altered or changed. But I agree with you that there are some minor shifts that we shouldn't just write off. She's not like a truly flatline static character, but I would say on the spectrum of characters that you would encounter, protagonists in the wider landscape of fantasy, certainly she's further towards the flat character side of that.
Absolutely, yes.
All right, so turning to the language, the writing style of the novel, I know this was one of the few things that we did actually talk about, prior to the making of this episode. So jump in there and extol the virtues of her writing style and choice of language.
This felt like a book written by a capital Y young person. To find out that she is actually 40? No, 50.
Yeah, yeah,
1973, right?
she's at least 50.
Yeah, is mind blowing. The language here is very natural and very current. Specifically, I remember the scene in the interrogation room where the one guy's like, she looked like someone looking for some fun." It's like, yeah, that's how someone would talk in that situation. It's a very natural sounding language, and kudos to her for making such natural language.
Yeah, and there were a few times where I'm struggling to decide how I want to phrase it, because I don't want to say that it was overdone, but once or twice I was kind of like, okay, maybe I would have phrased that a little bit different, or it comes up a little bit immature none of that is. I don't like any of that phrasing, but there it is. But not once did I feel any vibes of like, "Hey, fellow kids," or a failure to channel the the lexicon of the demographic that I thought both that the author belonged to and also was sort of writing at. And
How old is Lark supposed to be? Early 20s, right?
yeah, I guess in my brain I had put her at like almost 30ish, like mid to late 20s. I don't remember if it ever gets expressly described. And I said this to you before, but I'll repeat it now. I would also be interested to know if the author is, and I've met people that are like this that just don't, they age really gracefully. And so they just kind of, if you talk with them, you wouldn't know that they were 50. I wonder if she's that kind of a person, which this would still be an impressive, feat of writing style. But if she is not that way, you know what I mean? Like imagine that she's actually just like your standard, um, really formal, like British professor style of person. But she wrote it this way intentionally. Then I would say we're talking like master level channeling of a specific style. I'd be I'd be very interested to read other things that she's written that are in a different setting, something from a different series or a standalone, and see if she is she able to do this in other styles with the same degree of success at just nailing down this is the voice that I want to have for this project and the consistency and as I said just never faltering to the degree where you feel like you're being written down to. You never once feel like this is an older person trying to write like a younger person. I didn't. If you had told me she was 25, I would have believed you. If you'd said she was, our age and our in mid 30s, I would have believed you with no question. And so, just 10 out of 10 as far as the voice and the writing style is concerned.
Yeah, she is. Yeah, the voice is incredible, and I mean, relatedly, the book is incredibly queer for something written by a 50-year-old.
Yeah, I enjoyed those elements as well. Were you able to find through a quick search what the fan base or the wiki or whatever puts Lark's age at?
I do not know.
So we'll just assume adult, young adult of some description. But yeah, so in terms of the queer elements in the book, I was really pleased to see not only that those elements were present, but again, just executed with just brilliance. I didn't feel like this was a piece that was written with the intention of putting those elements in. They just flowed right into it. It felt totally natural, totally normal. To use a word that I don't particularly enjoy, but I really enjoyed those characters, particularly her brother and his boyfriend. I thought they were really fun characters. I thought that their relationship was treated with enough respect, but also not to the degree where you felt like a lip service was being done to it.
That felt like one of the most the 3 of them, but especially the 2 men relate their relationship, they felt like the most believable relationships in the book. The way the 3 of them interacted, but especially the way Logan and Brandon interacted was just incredibly believable and well written, I thought.
And the scene where Lark and her brother are sparring, and then the boyfriend rolls in with the tacos, maybe my favorite scene in the book.
That is a good scene, and we've
And
all
again,
been
just
there.
oh yeah, and from top to bottom, the scenes are believable. The character interactions are believable, and they flow nicely. And yeah, I just can't say enough good about her integration of those elements.
And I do think we need to put some special praise here for Denise, the slutty, upbeat necromancer. 10 out of 10.
Yep, I enjoyed that as well. And I don't know if there was more than one, but the one scene does come to mind where the brother and boyfriend show up at her office, and then Denise comes in, and the interaction between the four of them again just exemplifies the author's really consistent delivery of believable character interactions. It was a fantastic scene, and Denise's thirst is most welcome in the narrative.
Yes, again, especially to contrast with Way of Kings, where women were completely asexual at best. To have multiple women in this book be openly sexual beings was incredibly refreshing.
And sort of piggybacking off of that, how do you think the book does in terms of handling gender, I guess, sort of interaction between the portrayal of, masculinity and femininity, and the way that they interact? I'm thinking of, there's that guy that comes up to her in the club and grabs her wrist. There's quite a bit of masculine characters kind of coming in to serve as protector. How did you feel about that?
There is quite a bit, like you said, but Lark never really felt like a damsel, despite kind of being forced into that position a couple of times, especially by Logan. I mean, I'm thinking specifically of the scene outside the apartment where when Gregor shows up, Lark, in the narrative, she's like, I could see Logan, even in his drunken state, that dark part of him kept one eye on the situation, but he trusted me to handle it. I do think the gender dynamics in this were pretty good. Lark was believably feminine, but also, a badass, but not in a masculine way. Her lack of physical strength was emphasized multiple times, but her magical strength was also emphasized multiple times. So yeah, I mean, I think this was a really positive representation for gender.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I would say that on the whole, it does teeter a little close to the edge, because just about every scene where there is danger, there is a male that is sort of positioned as the fail-safe protector. The brother when the vampire shows up, Kang, as well as when she's in the Fae, it is both the vampire lord that saves her once, and then the benevolence of the Leviathan that saves her another time. And it is also all male characters that do all of the evil in the book as well. And so I think it does teeter, as I said, towards the edge, but I don't think it ever falls over into what I would call, for lack of a better phrase, sort of like a bad description.
Yeah, I definitely see what you're saying about the men do all the evil, and she is essentially frequently being saved by a man to some degree. Those are definitely valid criticisms. Yeah, I don't really have a response other than that because you're absolutely right.
All right. Well, and then since we're at gender, it makes sense to overtly discuss the elements of romance. And so, what were your thoughts on the totality of those elements in the novel?
Well, I already mentioned that I pegged Kang being in love with her from like the very first interaction. To be totally honest, she blindsided me with Hudson as much as Lark was blindsided by him. Like the fact that he was, a con man, a grifter, whatever you want to call him, completely threw me. I thought that this was going to be some sort of like love triangle. I thought we were going to get like whatever Kang is, if he's a werewolf or whatever, and then necromancer like love triangle shit. I completely did not have him pegged as someone out to use her.
No, yeah, she got me with that as well. I found that the romance elements were, I thought, written very well. I mean, there were definitely some why my pee pee hard moments.
Yeah, I agree. It was very and again just
I was
the
I was duly titillated.
yeah, I don't really remember any exceptionally titillating moments, but it was very enjoyable romance for sure. the way that Lark was interested in romance and companionship, but also was a sexual being who just wanted to get dick down. Like that was a very refreshing
Well, most of the
character.
dynamic wasn't it that she didn't want to deal with the hassle involved with that. It was her brother and his boyfriend and Denise that were the advocates of you should just get dick down one time.
Yeah, but then there, towards like the middle or so, she was like, you know what? Maybe I do need to get dick down. Actually, I guess it's more towards the end because it was when she was in the yard with Hudson, and also there before the fuck up with Kang.
Yeah, and two quick asides. The first being that I really enjoyed the beginning of that scene where she shows up and she's basically like, okay, what the fuck? Like I'm he wants me to dig in his yard, like I'm not doing that.
Uh-huh.
I enjoyed that, and then I don't know any other way to phrase it than to say that like I think the book is the inverse of like slut shaming. It does the opposite of that. It normalizes sexual behavior in a way that I thought was enjoyable, realistic, and again, not ever rising to the level of being overdone. It just it flowed nicely.
Again, this felt like it was written by someone much younger than it was because it definitely captured that, casual hookup culture type attitude.
Yeah, maybe to just in the interest of fairness to come up with two possible criticisms. There was a preponderance, I guess, of sort of physical descriptions, particularly of the male characters that she encountered, that seemed to me to be a little bit shallow. There was a lot of descriptions of her attire that maybe now that I'm thinking about it did verge on the side of okay, maybe that isn't believable. Like it almost seemed like she just didn't own but maybe two outfits, but we never get the impression that she's destitute. And we also get the impression that she does have an active social life, but then kind of we keep getting into these situations where she's kind of spending page time just telling us that she is wearing the same sort of like leather outfit, and then there's a almost invariably she wears the same type of clothes, and then there are a character is brought in to point out the clothes that she's wearing.
Yeah, there is a certain amount of it's that they're fantasy poor. They still have the money to go out and do whatever they need to do, but like they're always broke type situation.
Yeah, and if I was gonna just like go for the jugular and just make like the meanest criticism that I could make, that maybe the one element that does smack of like hey fellow kids is that you could make the argument that she thinks that the culture of young people is descriptions of males based entirely on how much hair they have and their age and clothes.
Yeah. I don't know. I do think that she set up that they had money problems just to give an easy hook, but I will say that the discussion of rental issues felt genuine. I know that the area Victoria, Vancouver, as I understand it, has a fairly high cost of living.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
So, but I definitely get where you're coming from. It could very well just be that that's the perspective. To go back to Dresden Files, one common criticism of Butcher was the way he tended to describe women in the Dresden Files, and his argument was always that was him writing in Dresden's voice, which it's up to each individual whether that's a valid argument or not. But I will say that he wrote another series that wasn't from the perspective of a sex-starved young man, and there was much less, purple prose about the female form in that book, in those books. So it's entirely plausible that you know that is Lark's voice in her mind. Now, if we read other books that are not from that kind of perspective and that contains similar things, then that's more of her voice. But that's just one possible explanation.
Yeah, for sure. And again, that criticism I think is, like I said, an intentionally sort of cutthroat way to analyze the book. I don't think it's necessarily a criticism that actually takes the book down a notch. It's
Right.
just that this is a way that you could view it. However, there is one criticism that I could make where the book does fall flat, and that is on the staff and trench coat ACAB scale, where this book gets an F.
Yes. It's not quite propaganda, but there's strong elements of the police are right, and the fact that Lark is a police consultant. Yeah, yeah. The ACAP scale. This is definitely an F minus. Not quite Hawk, not quite Hawk tier, but
No, I guess not in the sense that it isn't. I don't know. I guess I would say it does. It certainly romanticizes the concept of police departments, and there's a great deal of latitude that the officers have. The way that she humanizes them is by only showing those instances where they are engaging in activities where it's a murder scene, so the bad guy is obvious, and there's not any discussion at all or analysis at all through the any of the characters of police as such.
yeah, it's a lot easier to paint homicide detectives as, legitimate good guys than like narco cops or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is definitely a valid criticism. I guess that is one way she's showing her age, but yeah, there's I mean, and there really isn't much that pushes back against the idea that cops are a necessary good because I mean they don't even they kind of touch on the repercussions of Kang shooting that guy. Like he has to be in counseling and he's technically suspended. It is different because it's in Canada slightly, but yeah, it's I guess we'll just have to ACAB pill JC Mckenzie. I think that's a goal we can aim for.
Yeah, because if towards the end, if Lark had just been like, "Oh, sorry, honey, I don't fuck cops," that would have pushed me over the edge.
Oh yeah.
All right, well, hit me with the topic that you brought up before we started that you wanted to branch into a little bit, the concept of strategic genre blindness.
Yeah, I've touched on this a couple of times here. It's something I've noticed, especially it seems especially prominent in romance books, romance stories. But she actually expresses it in a couple of other ways in this book. Just this complete and obliviousness the character shows to the story they're in. While that may seem kind of meta and like how do they they're not in a story that there are certain things and I really wish I had highlighted them and saved them. But there were certain things about the necromancy, especially that like it's kind of like how no one in a zombie movie knows anything about zombies. Like they always get kettled and conceal that they got a bite, and they always make all those classic mistakes. Like, has no one in a zombie movie ever watched a zombie movie? Has no one in a romance novel ever read a romance novel? This necromancer, who apparently learned magic from Reddit and YouTube, is completely oblivious to certain like necromancy tropes, and it's killing me that I don't remember specifics here. Yeah, it's just a weird thing that I've noticed, that this kind of genre blindness, and it just seems to serve to create tension. Like her obliviousness to Kang's interest in her just serves to cause her to antagonize him because that seems to be what she thinks he wants.
Right.
And even as he all but says, "I'm into you, I love you, I want to be with you," she's still antagonizing him. And I mean, I suppose there's a certain amount of just not wanting to shit where you eat, which is certainly valid. Getting involved with your police contact is always a problem, and not just because they're police.
Yeah, I don't want to harp on it, but Kang's sort of like protective nature, particularly the novel sets him up as being anti physical abuse, juxtaposing that with him being a cop. It, mm-mm.
I will say, the one scene where, I think it was right before, Kang shoots that guy, where they're going in and Kang's like, "You know you're gonna have to stay in the car." And she's like, "No, I'm not. I'm a necromancer. If my skills aren't useful, I'm getting in the way, I'll find fucking cover." I thought that was a nice little takedown of the usual woman stays in the car argument scene.
Okay, yeah, yeah, I agree with that. I like that.
But other than that, just the complete obliviousness to certain genre tropes. I just wonder how much of it is. I mean, obviously, it's all deliberate, but I don't know. It's just something I noticed.
Yeah, it wasn't something I had really thought about a great deal beforehand, but yeah, I think it actually in this case serves to make the character more relatable, even if once or twice in the novel it comes off as a little bit heavy handed. Like she's a little bit more naive than you would expect based on the way that the character is set up. Like you would absolutely, it would have been well within the scope of what I expected if she had opened a chapter with Lark sitting in sitting in her couch curled up with a romance novel. And yet, as you say, she through her actions in the text, it seems as though she'd never read one.
Right.
So I'm right there with you. I thought that was a keen observation on your part. Let me hit you with my top 3 passages from the text. So he quickly raked me with his gaze, his attention snagging on my feet, currently snug in comfortable running shoes. I just thought that was a really well written sentence, and that he raked her with his gaze. I thought was just particularly pointed.
Yeah, very evocative.
It's about time you dusted off those coochie cobwebs.
Coochie cob I love that. Yes, coochie cobwebs.
The boys paused to check out Gregor's ass, and my brother, my fucking brother, piped up to say, "Hello, Daddy."
That whole scene is gold. Oh, I was giggling throughout that whole scene.
And I mean, it was a 10 out of 10 on the scale of enjoyment. Uh,
Yeah. That's a character we haven't really talked about, Gregor and the vampires.
yeah, hit me up.
I like the vampires. It's funny. I don't know how much of so most of my exposure to vampire lore comes from Vampire the Masquerade, which is basically like traditional vampire lore filtered through an edgy late 80s, early 90s lens. Think The Crow, City of Angels, that kind of thing. So I don't know how much the idea of a blood bond is like something White Wolf came up with, which is I highly doubt. Like I'm sure that has some origin in some other vampire fiction. The way it's used here is interesting. The fact that it is a two-way street, and Lark has some degree of power over Gregor, even as he has power over her. I thought that was a very interesting use of the blood, and the fact that the creating of more vampires is not guaranteed. And it's even implied that it's not necessarily the choice of the vampire whether they will be raised or not, because the one that she raised said he got lost or he was led astray. I thought it was implied that he was led astray, not just like he took a wrong turn.
Yeah, and admittedly, my exposure to vampires in fiction is very limited, but I've never encountered that particular riff on the idea where it takes them time to rise, as it were. And I thought that was actually a really interesting way to do it, or the just sort of the familial element that she brings in for why the vampire lord is so connected with the vampires he raises, because it adds this kind of almost like a hen having to sit on the egg.
Yeah, yeah, and especially there near the end when Gregor is talking about essentially fixing vampirism, so you don't have the hunger, you don't have the allergy to the sun, but you still have the immortality. Talking about what do you know of losing, having watched generations of your family live and die? that kind of thing. I thought that's really poignant. She really nailed the idea of a very, very old vampire who has, I mean, essentially created and destroyed small empires. I mean, it sounds like that's the kind of thing the vampires do.
And I loved, I'm forgetting her name, but the assistant to the vampire lord.
Estelle.
Yeah, maybe that was it. I liked that dynamic. How even once or twice she, she kind of even chastises the vampire, and she's like, "What are did you upset her? Like, what's going on?" And just their relationship, even though it did seem as though it was still sort of within the realm of the master servant archetype, it wasn't, the edges of it were blurred a little bit, and there was a rapport between them that was counter to what my expectations of that type of relationship would have entailed.
I did especially like the bit where he used a French nickname for Estelle, and Lark called out, "You're Italian. Why are you calling her French?" And he was like, "I have spent more time in France than I did in my home of Italy." And like the subtext I got to that was that he did not have a happy time in Italy, so he probably left there and doesn't want anything to do with that isthmus or peninsula.
Yeah, so maybe this is a good time for me to bring this up, given the mention of the use of the French nickname. Let's talk a little bit about the trigger warning or whatever that occurs at the very beginning of the book. Do you think that was necessary given the actual contents of the novel?
I think that there are definitely some people
Well, let me
who.
let me read it out actually, but before we get into it.
Okay.
So, Canadian disclaimer. You're entering the creative domain of a Canadian author. There will be a combination of British and American spellings, a combination of measurement systems, and maybe even a little French thrown in to spice things up. You've been warned. And then, content warning. This book contains explicit language, ghosts, spirits, souls, skeletons, bones, violence, blood, magic, necromancy, and animal sacrifices. Off the page as much as possible. Please read with care.
I mean, the first one is a little cringe.
Yeah, I would say, given that having actually read it, um, why is that there? What is
Yeah.
the deal with that?
Again, that feels like a reaction. Like she got criticism for her Canadianisms, for measuring things in pints and liters and miles and meters, whatever. And so she put that in there just to kind of thumb her nose, which whatever. The rest of the writing is fine. She can have a cringe little disclaimer at the beginning. The trigger warning, it kind of feels like half tongue in cheek, half legitimate. Look, these things are discussed in here. I don't go explicit with them, but I try to. But they are factors in this story, and I think it's fine to have that information at the beginning of a story. If you're someone who, like, some people would potentially be triggered by the scene in the club where she gets her hand grabbed. Maybe they would not enjoy reading that.
Yeah, but that's not mentioned in the content warning.
Yeah, you're right. It's mostly just the blood and the skeletons and stuff. I don't know. I don't think either of those disclaimers really need to be there. Um,
I could 100% see if there was just a disclaimer that said this book contains descriptions of animal sacrifice and may not be appropriate for some readers. That fine. I wouldn't do that personally myself, but I could understand that. The addition of like ghosts and spirits and skeletons, I don't know. I unless I'm just missing some cultural touchstone that belies my ignorance. This just seems like a really weird mix of just kind of trying to be a little bit humorous, but simultaneously, as you said, kind of thumbing the nose. And I will admit it affected my reading of the story because I kept expecting, I don't know, like some really sophisticated use of French or something, or like units of measure in the metric system. And more gratuitous things. I expected things that then didn't happen, and so my mind's eye was drawn back to these two disclaimers at the beginning of the book when it just shouldn't have been. And
Yeah,
and
I
and
I completely skipped over them. I remember reading the trigger warning. I did not read that Canadian warning. That might have colored my perception of it somewhat. Although I could tell that she was from Canada, just the way she wrote the area. You don't pick Victoria, Vancouver unless you're from Victoria, Vancouver. And the only reason why I know where Victoria is or anything about it is because it's where the Loading Ready Run folks are from, and I've been following them for like a decade. So, like, I've absorbed a little bit of knowledge about the area from watching their streams and stuff.
well, and
Um,
another layer of the weirdness is just you're writing fantasy, which the use of like ye old British is endemic, and so why are there people
less
who are
so
reading?
to urban fantasy.
Okay,
I mean,
fine, but are you telling me that there are people who are reading this novel if those warnings aren't there, and they get to the chapter where there's one French word used, and they're like, "Oh, it's one of those."
no, that disclaimer feels 100% a a troll, essentially. That I think she's probably gotten some comments or feedback or whatever, like, "Oh, you used the wrong spelling, or you used miles and kilometers, or you some shit like that." She's like, "You know what? Fuck these people. I'm gonna put this at the beginning of my books and just point to it when they make these stupid comments."
Right. Yeah,
Personally, I
and
would
I
just ignore those people, but get that bag, baby.
yeah, and I guess like the criticism I'm making is somebody who is in the mental space where the criticism that they're going to make of a book they're reading is I didn't like that there was French word. I didn't like that metric exists. I think that thumbing your nose at those types of readers at the expense of having an entirely sympathetic reader like myself or like you be drawn out of the narrative to be reminded that uh, by having read these disclaimers, I don't think was a good cost benefit analysis maneuver on her part.
That's fair.
Which again, it doesn't ruin the book, but as I said, just in full disclosure, there were several times throughout the story where, as you said, he uses a French nickname, and there's a little bit of discussion about that, and in my mind, the thought came unbidden, like, okay, is this what that whole disclaimer was for? Because she's going to use a French word once, and my guess is that with how immersive the story is, that she would not have wanted those disclaimers to have that particular effect. Yeah, and I guess that's all I'll say about that. But I mean, have we missed anything? Are there other
Well, I
topics that
did
you want
want
to jump
to
into?
sort of jump back to about trigger warnings. So, I'd actually forgotten about the trigger warning at the beginning of the book. When I mentioned in our like pre-show discussion, she has a trigger warning. She has a trigger warning on her website. Like she has a section on her website for trigger warnings. And I just want to read her little intro blurb. All my books are intended for ages 18 plus and include adult themes, language, and content. For some, the following are triggers. For others, these are grocery lists. There's no judgment here, only the hope that readers will feel safe with me. I trust you to know your heart and scars. Please read with care. To clarify, when I refer to sex, I'm referring to consensual sex. There is no consensual non con in my books. Also, none of my books contain rape for titillation or rape on the page. If there's a threat of sexual assault, it will be brief and promptly dealt with, usually seeing the perpetrator dealt with in a violent and gratifying manner. So I think the trigger warning is sincere, but done
But the
with
trigger
humor.
warning does not in the novel does not contain th- that part.
I'll be totally honest. This is another thing that is ringing my fan fiction bells because you'll see this kind of thing in fan fiction. You'll see these kind of trigger warnings and thing on fan fictions that similarly don't really contain anything that I would consider would necessitate this kind of thing. But
No, no, what I'm saying is that there is a physical assault and the threat of sexual assault in the text, but that is not one of the things that is in the trigger warning in this novel.
Right.
The trigger warning for the novel is a bunch of random shit that makes, to me, again, admitting that there is the possibility that she's making overtures to cultures that I am woefully ignorant of, but I have I have never heard of a trigger warning for skeletons or ghosts, and yet the the actual thing that you would imagine might necessitate a trigger warning that she spends time detailing on her actual website occurs in this novel, but does not have a trigger warning.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue explicit language and violence, but there's no mention of sex or sexual violence. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I don't really have an explanation. It is at odds with the rest of the text, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess ultimately, if the worst part of the novel is the two little tiny blurbs at the very beginning, again, maybe that's just another pip in her hat.
Right.
I think that the stepping back and directly responding to the trigger warning that you read from the website, that seems to me to be very genuine and very kind, and I think laudable.
Yes, I agree. I think this is definitely this is coming from a place of care and love. That's an excellent place to start writing, I think.
Yeah, and you just don't hear many authors say that they explicitly say that one of my goals is to I want you to feel safe with me. I think that was
Right.
a really eloquent way of putting it.
Absolutely. I think that having an author explicitly state that they want their books to be a safe place, that is definitely laudable.
So I guess I feel like we might be getting into the territory of just kind of criticizing for criticism's sake, but how do you feel about the presence of animal sacrifice as a necessity of her magic, but then the justification that she uses is that the animals will go to the butcher slash and or they are terminally ill animals.
I think it was a tad excessive. I think the needing a living sacrifice was a it's a good idea as for a narrative device because it gives her a limiter to take off essentially. I do think that the I really enjoyed the scene. Maybe enjoyed is the wrong word. The scene with the goat, her description was her talk about it sounded really nice and fun. And I've seen goats in real life, and they do look adorably stupid or stupidly adorable, one or the other. So I totally get where she's coming from with goats. I don't know if I could bring myself to kill a goat in that situation. Like I totally get where her positions on those. But I do think it was I think the lengths they went to be like to make the animal sacrifice as ethical as possible felt a little it felt a little like someone trying to justify
They're necessary what?
their necessary act. Like someone who has to eat meat to survive, like they don't have a choice, trying to justify it with like, oh, well, it's a good source of protein, and I get a lot of iron, and making all these true statements, but like that's not the reason you're doing it, and it doesn't like change that you're doing it.
Yeah, I did feel like the amount of effort that she went to justify it in the text was probably intellectually equivalent to the amount of mental work that would have needed to be done to just come up with a different mechanism.
Yeah, because I can think of a couple of different possibilities that don't involve animal sacrifice that would be about as ethical as what she does with less narrative space devoted to it.
Yeah, but true to her website disclaimer, at least, the those sections were reasonably brief.
And while she did do a lot of blood splattering, I don't feel her descriptions of anything were excessive.
No, I didn't think it was excessive. And I guess both because of the necromancer side of it, and then also that it was a crime procedural type thing. I think that that kind of is expected.
I mean, even the I did appreciate the descriptions of the crime scenes, which were vivid, even though they lacked detail. I don't know about you, but I got a very good sense of the crime scenes without getting a lot of gory details.
Yeah, I would just piggyback on you, I guess, there and say I agree. I felt like there was enough description that I felt like I was in the room, but not so much that I felt like, okay, let's I get it. You know, there's gore, descriptions of blood, etc.
And I did appreciate that, to kind of go back to your discussion of gender, that they initially thought it was the guy who is the vengeful spirit, and it turned out it was the woman. That is a bit of a twist, even if the the vengeful woman coming back from the dead is a bit of a is also a bit of a trope.
I got vibes of like the that Sherlock Holmes interpretation, the Elementary. It had Lucy Liu, I believe,
Yeah,
where she was a cop or a consultant or something like that, with just kind of like the roles reversed a little bit. I thought that the elements of the procedural cop crime drama part of it I thought were very consistent with the shows that I have watched. And on that note, the novel reads in a very television show or cinematic way. It's extremely vivid in that sense, and I think that's yet another gold star, 10 out of 10, pip in the hat, as we've been saying.
yeah, absolutely. She doesn't linger on scenes that, we know what happens. We don't need to see her raise another spirit unless they're gonna say something plot relevant. We don't need to see all of these things. She just gets through it in a line or a paragraph, and it's done. That was really nice. Really helped with the pacing, I think. Although the whole story took place over less than a week, I'd have to I'd have to go through it, but I feel like it took place over, like, 3 or 4 days tops.
Yeah, the on the page pacing of the action was fantastic. The the whatever you want to call it, like the real time, the amount of days that passed according to the narrative did seem a little bit condensed.
Yeah, I think part of that was that a lot of stuff happened at night, which meant that, days necessarily got skipped. I do think there was some compression, but that's pretty common in police procedurals. If they actually showed the time frame, a lot of, especially forensic evidence gathering, goes in. The idea of catching a perpetrator quickly goes right out the window.
I feel like this was a novel that I think was well edited.
Yes.
You can imagine that there might have been additional material that got cut, even some that might have been enjoyable to read, but the end result is a very tight narrative that moves with the pacing that you desire as a reader, but also you can tell that the author has an intentionality to how fast the events are taking place, and it's consistent throughout, from the first page to the last. And so, even though in terms of the number of days that pass in real time, might be seem a little bit condensed and or weird in retrospect, I never felt like it was pacing too fast as I was reading.
No, and this is something that I've felt in several books where you'll have one chapter end with a character deciding they need to take an action. And then the next chapter we pick up with them and a significant amount of time has passed and they're still like fretting over the action. This is one major criticism of Way of Kings, just to shoot the elephant in the room.
5,000 years later.
Yeah. So, I really appreciated that there weren't a lot of time skips where Lark had made a decision and hadn't done something. Usually it was like she makes a decision and then it's a day or two later and she's implementing that decision or something has forced her hand or what have you. Like it's I appreciated that because it feels like something they do to kind of authors do to like keep you hooked in or something and it just feels cheap and dumb.
What else you got? Anything that we've missed?
Oh, I'm sure there is, but nothing really comes to mind.
Well, then it's time for the ultimate question. Is it better than Knight Errant?
Absolutely. I mean, I believe I said that this may be the most enjoyable book I have ever read. It is. I did not have difficulty reading this book. I had difficulty putting it down, except when I literally was falling asleep reading it. Not because it was boring, but because I was that fucking tired.
Well, I mean, there you have it. J.C. Mckenzie with Deathmaker smashing past Knight Errant, edging by the After the Revolution, and with a subsequent heeled kick to the crotch of Way of Kings, entering the position of being our favorite novel so far in our journey here together.
So that means the pressure is really on you to come up with a good book next time because you are 0 for 2 so far.
Yes, I have picked the duds.
So, what are we reading next week?
We are going to get into the 5th season, the first book in the Broken Earth series by N.K. Jemisin. And this is a book that's received, pretty intense critical acclaim and a lot of scholarly notice. And so I would assume that it's I mean, this is a Hugo Award winner, so I can't lose.
All right. Well, I have now purchased it on Audible, so I will be listening to it over the next few days, and we will see how it goes. I look forward to it.
All right, and with that, hopefully you've enjoyed the presentation, the discussion, and we will be back with the 5th season next time, and I hope you'll join us then.
And hey, let us know if you want us to do more of Lark Morgan, because, I mean, I'm definitely going to be reading more of this series. So if you want to hear us talk about the rest of the series, let us know.
Fuck yeah, give us the excuse.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll see you next time. Hey, thanks for listening. You can follow us on Twitter at Staff Trenchcoat. Look for us on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Feel free to shoot us an email at staffandtrenchcoat@gmail.com if you have a book recommendation, and we hope to see you in the next episode.